Hi, I'm Malika Bilal in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Buenos Aires' tale of two cities. We explore slum life in Argentina's capital. Well, since I'm sitting in this chair, Julio Varela is sitting in mine, acting as digital producer today. I like to see you in that chair.
I like to be in this chair.
Well, Julio, I know there's a lot of conversation online about this topic in Spanish and in English.
In both languages.
So what are you seeing?
What I want to do is sort of start it with sort of how this began as a hashtag in Argentina, and it actually started to trend a little bit locally, and it was called Yo apoyo la carpa villera, which means I support the villera tent. So I just want to show you a couple of tweets to kind of get it going.
Please.
And this is where it is on Twitter. It says Yo apoyo la carpa villera, and you can see a lot of people have tweeted in. But also we actually got tweets from the organizers today, and they wanted to let us know that the 1 month anniversary of the hunger strike will be this Wednesday, and they still have yet to get a government response. So as you tweet in during the show, please use hashtag AJStream.
Looking forward to what you have to say. Well, these conversations are always better when you're involved. So if you haven't already, like us on facebook.com/AJStream and tell us what's on your mind. And then you too will be in the stream.
Hi, I am Tatiana Papanastasiou. I am a sociologist and I'm in the stream.
Sewage in the streets, rats in the house, electricity and water a luxury. That's just a taste of life in Buenos Aires' Villas Miserias, little cities of misery. The slums sit just across the train tracks from the city's upscale shops and apartments, yet the hundreds of thousands of people living in them feel invisible. They want paved roads, a sewage system, and other improvements promised in a 2009 urbanization law. And now many have taken their demands to the city center, hunger striking in a giant tent. The city government hasn't acknowledged the protests, but passers-by are finding it hard to ignore. And the question that began in the slums has spread beyond the villas. If a third of the world's urban population is living in slums like Buenos Aires' shanty towns, how can and should cities respond? Well, with us to discuss this is Teodelina Basavilbaso, an Argentine journalist who covered Buenos Aires' slums for 4 years. Adrian Lutbach, a hunger strike organizer and president of the Buenos Aires University Federation. And in London, David Satterthwaite, urban researcher with the International Institute for Environment and Development. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, I want to get the conversation started with the voices of people living in these slums. Now, Julio, these protests have a real grassroots feel to them. But of course, along with the action that's happening on the streets, activists are taking it upon themselves to post things online like videos and pictures. So what are you seeing?
It's an interesting use of social media, obviously, that we're having a hunger strike, and the organizers not only want to talk about the tent that's happening in Buenos Aires, but also they want to show video of what's going on in the actual villas. And I'm actually going to show one of what's going on, and I'm going to try to translate a little bit about it, Malika.
Falta la mitad de trabajo. Se hizo la mitad, falta la mitad.
So she said we talk about we did half the work, but we also have volunteers that come in. And if you notice this gentleman coming in talking about dignity, and he says talking about maintaining the struggle. And that's where the residents are working together to sort of clean those conditions. So this is what's been going on, and it's actually a very underreported story, even in Argentina, but it's literally has come from social media.
Right. Well, speaking of reporting, Teodelina, you covered the villas for 4 years.
Yes.
So can you describe to us vividly, perhaps, what are the living conditions that led to the hunger strike that we see today?
Yes, well, if you go to Buenos Aires and you take, for example, the Ilia highway, you will see like all these buildings, like you will see these luxuries and expensive buildings, and the slums there, like the contrast is really impressive to see. And if you walk inside the slum Villa 31, you'll see like there's these small passages there's no pavement, right? There's of land, and you would see like 3 or 4 stories that are like they could collapse in any minute. They don't have sewer services. They don't have a sanitation service. This highway that is beside their house makes the house move a lot. I visit one of the house that is in the middle of the highway, like between the highway, and she was like, I'm afraid when I have to sleep during the night because sometimes I have the feeling that a car is going to crash into my house. So I think that yes, like finally in 2009, as you said, like the urbanization law came out, and now the people are asking for the urbanization, for the integration. And definitely, I think that the most important thing here is the integration of the slums into the city, you know?
Integrating. Well, you painted a very tragic picture, really. Adrian, I want to go to you because, of course, you are a hunger striker. You're there. What led you to hunger strike?
Hi, what led me to hunger strike is to see so many people in the situation that they are living on the slums. The 11% of the population of the city is on that condition, and they are fighting to laws that have been approved to apply it, and that laws are not applied by the government. That's why me, a student, and a lot of people from different parts of the society are supporting the fight from the people of the villas or the slums.
You said not being applied by the government, so that leads us to our next guest. I want to bring in Buenos Aires, Diego Guelar, spokesman for the Republican proposal. Now that's the mayor's political party. Diego, thank you for being with this stream. I'd like, in your view, because I know that you have visited the VS, what's gone wrong? Why are we seeing what we're seeing today?
Many things are going wrong in Argentina. As you probably know, we are lacking something like 3 million houses. That means we have in between 10 and 12 million Argentinians living in very bad condition in terms of its housing. In Buenos Aires province, that is the metropolitan area, you know, there is Buenos Aires federal district, as Washington federal district. Buenos Aires are two Buenos Aires. The city by itself, where 3 million people live, including myself, and 3 million people get in and out every day. That means during the day we are living in a 6 million city. But this is the federal district. You have the metropolitan area, that means the outskirts of the city that are in the jurisdiction of the Buenos Aires province. There you have around in between 3 and 5 million people living in very bad social condition. In the case of Buenos Aires, we have around 200 acres that are slums, and in between 160 and 170,000 people living in this terrible condition. That the 10, that is 1 block from the place where I am in this moment in the studio of Al Jazeera, in the center of the city where the obelisk is, 1 block from the Colón Theater, really the heart of the city. We have a 10 of the people that is protesting and doing their claims for the last month in a pacific way. And of course we are living in a democracy and they have all the right to do so.
Right.
So it's interesting you say, Malika, we're getting some tweets about conditions in the slum and also just about the hunger strike in general and what people are thinking. So I want to share a couple and then ask a question. First of all, Tomas tweeted in Spanish, so you know that ambulances can't even enter the villas, and he feels that urbanizarlas, which means to urbanize them, is the only way to solve this. And then Ingrid says that I think that everyone who isn't rich in Argentina has a reason to complain about housing, especially in gentrified areas of Buenos Aires. And then Neshilan says it's all about being more socially aware instead of turning a blind eye to the harsh realities faced by the poor in Buenos Aires. So Teodelina,
yes.
The question, talking about the situation, how this is, are people turning a blind eye to what's going on just because is what what Gustavo said, saying that, well, this is only happening in the federal district and not in the urban district. Why has there been more action about this, or has this been a problem that's just been ongoing that people have been ignoring?
So you mean the society or the government?
Both. I mean, in the society or the government.
I think that in society we have like these two views. Some people say that, hey, the villas is horrible there. Let's relocate them, you know, and forgetting about that people go to the hospitals there, they go to school there. They cannot relocate 40,000 people, you know. And you have the other people that's the other view that say, hey, you should urbanize the slum, you know, and integrate them to the city. So I think they have these two views, you know, the Argentinian that say, hey, relocate them. They are there as illegal tenants, they didn't pay for the land, so you should kick them out. Like you have like that, some people really think like that, and it's not nice, and other people think that they should urbanize, you know.
So Adrian, I want to go to you to pick up on what Teodelina is saying. Among the people that you are protesting with, what are you asking for? Are you asking for the residents of these slum areas to be relocated, to be urbanized? What are your demands?
We are asking for the urbanization and the people that could stay where they live. For example, in Villa 31, there are people that are living there for 40 years. They are family, they have a history. I think the politics from the city government tries to the people that live on the slums go to the other areas, to the metropolitan areas outside of the city, but we want to stay on the city. The people that live on the slums want to stay on the city because they are neighbors of the city, and we have 29 days of fighting with in a tent in the city center, and the government even don't want to go in a reunion, in a meeting, to talk with the people that are in hunger strike.
Diego, you heard what Adrian said, and he also ended that by saying that the government is not willing to talk about this with the hunger strikers. What is the city government doing?
No, the government is working very hard to solve this problem. It used to be a debate in between relocalization of the slums and urbanization. I would say that now it's very clear that there is no discussion anymore. The slum has to be urbanized. The government is working on that. The government is doing a great effort in terms of schooling, in terms of hospitals, in terms of transportation, that were in very bad shape 6 years ago. The public works in the city increased in these 6 years more than the last 30 years. That means that there was a lot of improvements in the city.
Adrian, looks like you want to respond.
Yes, the city budget for housing is 2%. That one, it's only 2% of the city budget is for housing. It's one of the more little housing budgets of the region. It's not the politics of the city government are not to make houses on the city, because all the years pass and the budget for housing is decreasing. It's not increasing.
So Diego and Adrian are debating about Buenos Aires, but we're also getting some live tweets about the whole issue of integration and slums. So I want to read a question from Odeli, who talks about this topic and says, how on earth would you actually begin to integrate slums in the city? So I actually want to bring David into this conversation, given the context of Buenos Aires, and you can see right now that, you know, there's a little bit like who's to blame and what's going on. But what starts happening? What does actual integration mean when you talk about slums and urban areas?
Well, slums are integrated into a city. That's where all your cheap labor is. That's where all your servants are. That's where a lot of the economy is. It's just people's choice not to recognize this. Now, we have 30 years experience of urbanizing slums. And oddly enough, some of the most interesting experiences are actually in Buenos Aires, in the peripheral municipalities. I've been going every year for 30 years to Barrio San Jorge and Barrio Ardoy in San Fernando. And there you have municipal authorities working with the population, building new houses, putting in water, putting in sewers, putting in drains. I've seen the same in Moreno. I've seen this happen in maybe 20 different African nation cities. The one innovation that I think maybe Argentina could consider is an innovation that's been developed by federations of slum dwellers in Africa and Asia. And what they've done is they've said, look, we protest, and we achieve nothing. Let's try to show government just how capable we are of working with them in solutions. So what the slum dweller federations do is they do an enumeration and a census and a map of their district. And they show local government their capability, and they come to local government with proposals, with suggestions. And maybe this would help to break the deadlock in Argentina.
Well, David, you mentioned map, and that's a perfect segue to what's on my laptop here. Now, this is a map of the villas in Buenos Aires. You can see here they are numbered, and these are all these little numbers over here around this map are where all of them are. Now, this is a map of those areas, but on the official map of Buenos Aires, those same areas don't show up. So, Tia Delina, would the first step for any of this process and progress to happen be getting put on the map, literally?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How do we go about that happening?
I think that this making visible the problem, as you said, right? Like the people have to know, we should integrate them to the city.
So making visible the problem. Right now they're right by the obelisk and Buenos Aires. So they're visible, they're out there, they're on this show today. Is this going to have an actual effect in the city? And what are people in the city doing right now? Are they ignoring them, or is this disrupting traffic? How effective do you think this is actually going to be?
Do you mean by the society or the effective for whom?
Well, effective for the larger society, but will these hunger strikers get their wish?
Look, I think that, as they said, there were some improvements made. There's still a lot to do. But I think that we are like stuck in political issues, you know, because the land where the Villa 31 is, it belongs to federal government. And so I think that, and Mauricio Macri, the mayor, is like the candidate for next year. He's the candidate for president. So we have like a big political fight without the between the federal government and the city of Buenos Aires, and in between them are the people. So I think it's like always, the people are hostages of the political fights between the two governments.
Call in the middle. Diego, naturally I want to go to you because Buenos Aires is actually an autonomous region. So do you actually need the help of the federal government to make change?
No, without any doubt, I agree completely with the explanation of my co-panelist, because the city is under siege by the national government. It's very hard to explain that something like this is happening. There is no metropolitan area institution functioning. To give you an example, more than 70% of the people that is assisted in the Buenos Aires Federal District hospitals came from the outskirts of the city. We are proud of that. We think that that is a solidarity that we have to use very, very actively, because the hospital system in Buenos Aires province is in very bad shape than what the majority of the people imagine. We have 3 million people living in Buenos Aires city. But we have another 8 million people living in the outskirts. It's basically the same city. It's the metropolitan area in very bad shape. And there's no cooperation at all in garbage issues, in security issues, in health issues, in education issues. That is very hard for the local government in a very crazy situation. This is very hard to explain. I am the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of my party, and it's very hard to explain that such a situation it's happening in Argentina in the beginning of the 21st century. It's not a matter if you belong to the same party or not. there is an obligation to work together, no matter to what party you belong. And this lack of cooperation is a major issue in terms of Buenos Aires City. Remember that
Malika,
we are the capital of the national protest.
Malika, we asked for
everybody.
Diego, hold on 1 second.
Immigration.
I hear what you're saying, Diego. I hear you're saying that this is a tragedy. That
right, and we actually
asked
that same question to our community. Who's more responsible, local, federal, considering Buenos Aires' situation? And R.H. Jabbar says, everyone really has a role to play, but he says especially local government, because they are directly involved in slum dwellers' basic well-being. So I have this question for Adrián. You're a hunger striker. You're in the middle of the city helping out. There's a question of, who's to blame here? Is it local? Is it federal? You're saying you're not getting a response. You actually have a representative of the same political party here. What would you say? How does this get resolved?
I think it's very simple. The government, Diego was talking about the national government. The national government is responsible for many things, but the city government has a tent in the center of their city that they are the party of their governor, and they can give a reunion in 29 days of hunger strike. They couldn't give a reunion to people that are starving to see and to visibilize a problem that it's to the most poor people on the city. I think in all these years, Argentina grew in the last 10 years, and the problem is that the politics was on favor to real estate business and not to the people in slums. That's the major problem, that the politics are not orientated to solve the problem of urbanization of the people in slums. Is orientated to make more business with real estate and with all kind of stuff.
Heavy criticism there, Teodelina.
Yes, I want to ask Diego, was it right? Because I think that the city of Buenos Aires is not answering, because they think that the one that put the tent in Obelisco, that is the Corriente Villera Independiente, are not like reliable. So I am not saying this is the case, but I would like to know for him if he thinks that the ones that organized this, because we all agree that the villa, it must be urbanized, we must integrate it to the city, the poor is an issue, like we are all agreeing in the same thing.
Right.
So my question to Diego here is to know, having the opportunity to have him here, is to know why they are not answering to Corriente Villera Independiente.
Diego, we have about 30 seconds left, so I know that's a tough one to answer, but can you give us a quick word?
Okay. No, that's very easy. In a way, we have institutions. We have formal links with the different neighborhoods and the different villas in Buenos Aires. What the government think is that the people that is in this tent, although they have all the right to protest, they are not representative of the villas by itself, but they have their authorities. That means there is formal links where the dialogue is being held in permanent terms.
So we'll talk about in the post-show who are the formal representatives who can represent this tent protest. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have in the main show right now, but we'll finish this conversation in our post-show at stream.aljazeera.com. You don't want to miss it. Now on the next show, is it possible for good stereotypes to be bad? We'll discuss the so-called model minority myth and ask how it's impacting Asian Americans. Until then, Julio and I will see you online. Welcome back. This conversation has only just gotten started, so let's dive right into our online post show about Argentina's slums. Now, before we entered the post show, Diego was giving an answer, and Tio Delena wants to respond to it. Something about immigration. Go ahead.
Yes, he was talking about immigration, and I think that we have to be very careful here, because if you read in Twitter and in the comments that people post in the newspaper articles in Argentina, they sometimes are a little bit xenophobic with immigrants. So I think that we should be careful. It's true that in Villa 31, like 50% are immigrants, come from Bolivia, Paraguay, Peru. But I think that we should be very careful, because I remember, for example, Mauricio Macri, the mayor, in 2009, when they occupy a territory in Dominicano, he said like, immigration is out of control. Something that is not true and maybe could alarm Argentinians. And I think that's why like we should be careful with the words we use, talking about immigration, and that immigration, there are a lot of people that come to work, that come to have a better life in Argentina, and I think we should be careful with that.
That makes sense. Julio.
Could I make a comment on this, please?
Please go ahead, David.
Yeah, David,
one of the tools by which organized slum dwellers get the attention of governments is to take on the task of doing the census of each of their informal settlements. And this gives great detail: who lives there, how long they've been there, where they work. You also map each of the informal settlements. So instead of going to local government protesting that your sewers don't work, you go with a map, you go with details of everyone that lives there, you expose all these myths. Politicians love to pretend that there's lots of immigrants there that shouldn't be there, or there's lots of unemployed people, and these censuses of informal settlements show these to be a lie. And as you get documentation by the inhabitants of all the informal settlements, so you begin a citywide and a metropolitan region-wide discussion of how you address them. And the other beauty of it is that if you come with detailed maps, you've also got the basis for discussing how you bring in the sewers, how you widen the roads, how you bring in the access roads. In some ways, I know it's bad to put the onus on the slum dwellers to produce this documentation, but in maybe 30 nations in Africa and Asia, producing this documentation has opened new lines of discussion with government and new agreements, even joint funds which the slum dweller federations and the local governments control and manage together.
Our community.
Can I add something?
Our community's been saying, raising a couple of issues, not only about immigration, Malika, but also about who's profiting from all this misery. And I want to share a comment from Juan Pablo, who says, who are these dubious entrepreneurs making money out of misery? And can something be done about them? What happens when private profit shapes slums? So my question for Diego, is it naive to say that misery is being used for profit in Argentina? Or is this speaking more to a larger societal issue that has happened in the history of the country? And why is there cynicism about such a comment that we're getting from Juan Pablo?
Really what is happening in Argentina is that during the last few decades there is an extreme decay of social and political organization. We have a major crisis of political parties. We have a major crisis in terms of social organization, and we have to face that and solve this problem without any doubt through social and political organization that cannot be solved by one administration. We are living in a very confusing period. This lack of cooperation in between national government and local government is a major issue. I was listening to you regarding immigration. Well, I am very proud as Argentinian that we have been receiving millions of Chileans, Bolivians, Paraguayans, Uruguayans to our territory and treat them as nationals. I think that this is, I would say, something extraordinarily good of the Argentinian feeling in terms of integration and recognition that finally we are a big nation, that Chileans, Bolivians, Paraguayans or Uruguayans, they are our brothers, that we form a big nationality, even though we came from different countries. And I really think that we have to recognize this aspect of Argentinian civilization probably as one of our best aspects or sides, because even in the periods of very high unemployment, we reached in some moment 25–30% of unemployment, and even in those moments there was no voice saying we have to send back our neighbors, we have to repress them. And I think that this is something that we have to underline as a very good side of Argentinian culture and personality.
But if we want,
Adrian, go ahead.
But if we want to, we say that we are equals, the people that live on the slums have to be treated like all the rest of the citizens, and that is the thing that the government, the city government, is not doing, because if they want to treat the people on the slums like they deserve, they have to apply the law of urbanization. They have to attend to the calls, to the things we are saying. The Corriente Villera Independiente put a tent in the city center after doing a lot of mobilization to having reunion. Is like the last resource after 3 years of fighting. And what was saying about the planning and all that stuff, the Corriente Villera did mapping, all the stuff. We do volunteer work all the Saturdays in the slums. We are working, but we are tired of not being listened. That's why we do this strong measure that is hunger strike.
So Adrian, I mean, you mentioned that this is a last resort, this hunger strike, after 3 years of trying to talk to officials. How optimistic are you that this is actually going to make a difference?
I think the situation is difficult because the government is not responding after 29 days of fight. But I think the solidarity that is making the campaign Yo apoyo la Carpa Villera and all the things we are making, a lot of social organizations are coming to the Carpa, and it's growing a big solidarity bond with a lot of people. And then I think that's why they will have to listen us, because the movement that starts with the Corriente Villera Independiente is getting bigger and bigger, and it's showing a problem that the people in the government don't want to see.
Andres is a video comment, actually speaks about how this is a much of a bigger issue, and I just want to play a little bit of what he says.
Sure, please do.
The month-long hunger strike going on is unprecedented, but not really unexpected. The city's housing crisis has aggravated in the past few years, so if slum dwellers get to build social consent and gain solidarity for their cause, that will be because theirs is not an isolated problem, but rather the result of a lack of regulation of the real estate market, and that affects most of the city's population.
So David, you go back to like how this is not an isolated problem, and you did talk about sort of more global solutions, but specifically for Argentina, you did mention a little bit about it. Can you say more about how does this get truly solved?
Well, it gets truly solved by urbanizing what we term slums and slowly turning them actually into very nice places to live and to work. And there's a lot of experience in it. Oddly enough, in Rosario, Argentina's third largest city, there's been a very fine slum urbanization program. As I mentioned already, in Moreno and in San Fernando, two of the peripheral and among the poorest municipalities, there's been this agreement. What needs to happen is that the slum dwellers need to be organized and to be clear about what they want, and that then helps the local government understand how they can work together, how they can support. And again, I go back to all the slum dweller federations that I've had the privilege of visiting in all over Africa and Asia. And it's their competence and their capacity to show local government that they're allies, they're people with capability that overcomes the hurdle. And once you've got it working in 2 or 3 places, so the whole city begins to learn from it. And as the city begins to learn from it, we begin to move towards what should be uncontroversial. everyone living and working in a city has the right to a secure home with water, sanitation, drainage, healthcare, and schools.
Well, David, there's no better place to leave this conversation with those last words. Shouldn't be controversial. I want to thank all of our guests. That's all the time we have today for this discussion. Teodelina Basa Belvaso, Adrian Lutzbach, and David Satterwait, and of course, Diego. On the next show, is it possible for good stereotypes to be bad? We'll discuss the so-called model minority myth and ask how it's impacting Asian Americans. Until then, we'll see you online.